Here is the exciting conclusion of our spoiler review. We got the Mythics and Masterpieces coming out, and it seems like they're pretty low on the amount of Mythics and Masterpieces we get in this set, so it might be easier to collect them all, less elite packs to get through. But honestly, I'm looking at the rares, and that's where I want to get the most out of this set. So we'll see how it goes, and yeah, let's just talk about what we got here. We got Borborigmos and Fibblethip, which is 17 mana, 6/5. So Bro can fetch him. So when this creature enters the battlefield or attacks, draw 2 cards. You may deal X damage to the first opposing creature. X is equal to 3 times the number of support cards in your hand. If you do, discard all support cards from your hand. And when this creature dies, return it to your hand. It gains 3 mana. So, why would we want to discard all our support cards from our hand? Things that I could think of is so that you can bring them back from the graveyard using Brilliant Restoration, Starfield of Nyx, Invoke Justice, anything like that. So this could be a cool card to pair with that, but it's very situational, I guess. But that could potentially be a pretty powerful effect. So at first I wasn't that psyched about this card, but thinking about it a little more, some graveyard recursion can be really effective when paired with this card. So we'll just leave it at that. Elish Norn, 11 mana, 3/5 with Vigilance. When an opposing source deals damage to you or a creature you control, if your opponent has 3 or more mana in the hand, drain 3 mana from your opponent's hand. Otherwise, your opponent loses 3 life. Oh, wow. So that's pretty cool. At the beginning of your turn, if you control a creature with 2 or more reinforcements, you lose 2 creature reinforcements, then exile this card and create the Argent Etchings token. So we'll just have to see what that token does before we know how good of a card this is. But I like that first part. So basically, you're punishing an opponent for dealing damage to you, drain 3 mana, or lose 3 lives. So I think that can be a pretty good effect. I'll have to see when we use this card just how effective that is, but I kind of like it. I'm not discounting this card yet, but otherwise not amazing. Jin Gataxias. So we get another Jin. 5/5 with Ward for 17 mana, and the Ward is drained 6 mana from your hand. When you cast a support or spell card with mana that costs 9 or greater, draw a card and gains 3 mana. So good loop continuer, I think. At the beginning of your turn, if you have 15 or more mana in your hand, drain 15 mana from your hand. Then exile this card and create a Great Synthesis token. So, yeah. Hard to say how good this card really is without knowing what the token does, but we'll just have to see. 18 mana for a 6/6 with Menace and Lifelink, though, and Vigilance. So, so far, that's actually a pretty decent card on its own. But when this creature enters the battlefield or attacks, destroy the top 2 cards of your library. And if there are 6 or more cards in your graveyard, pick one of the first 4 creature cards from the graveyard, return it to the battlefield under your control. That's pretty good. Then exile the first 5 cards from your graveyard. This effect can trigger only once per turn. I guess that's cool. I don't like the exiling from your graveyard, but I guess if you pair it with something that takes advantage of exile, like Unlicensed Hearst, for example, maybe that's a way to mitigate the effects from that. But as it stands, it's an okay card. It's got enough good things going for it to make it worth using in a lot of decks, but there are some things I don't love about it. But I mean, it's still pretty powerful effect. Picking a creature card from your graveyard and putting it to the battlefield under your control is always strong. So, good card, and it's also tricolor, so you can use it with your Meeting of the Five. Same with Borborigmos and Fibthip. So that's pretty cool. Shieldred. 16 mana, 4/5 with Menace. When this creature enters the battlefield, destroy the first opposing non-token creature. Okay, so that's pretty good. At the beginning of your turn, mill 8, exile all cards from your opponent's graveyard. Exile this card, then create a True Scriptures token. So there's a lot of stuff to pair with that. I could see this being good in a Kaya deck. Both Kaya 1 and Kaya, I think 3 is the latest one that takes advantage of exile. So that's pretty cool. I could see that being a good use for this card. And then you'll just have to see what that True Scriptures token does. But pretty good. I don't hate it. I like that first ability where you just destroy a creature when it enters the battlefield. Always a good effect. Thalia and the Gitrog Monster. It's a 4/4 with Berserker, Death Touch, and First Strike. So that's already, just that alone makes this a card worth using, because it's just going to be going through any creature that has prevent damage. It's basically going to kill. I think even with that Death Touch, that if you fight another creature with First Strike, the Death Touch will kill it. I think this creature will still take damage when that happens, but already that's cool. So, when a creature your opponent controls enters the battlefield, that creature is disabled until your next turn. So that's already a good loop stopper there. So, very strong already. It's only a 12 mana card, too. I feel like that's almost undercosted for how much you get out of it. At the beginning of your turn, the first creature card in your hand that can gain mana gains 8 mana. That's good, too. When this creature attacks, target creature you control loses a reinforcement. If it can't destroy that creature, then draw a card. It gains 4 mana. So that's really the only downside of this card. Seems to destroy your other creatures. But at least you draw a card and gain 4 mana from it. But yeah, there is a bit of a downside to using this card. Otherwise, a fantastic card. Is it a chase card? I think so. I think it's a really good card. And then I thought that the full art was cool for this card as well. Urabrask. 12 mana, 4/4 with First Strike. And it has levels. When you cast a card, deal 2 damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, gain 4 mana, increase this card's level by 1. Wow, that's already really good. That gain 4 mana, I really like. Cast a spell card. So this is similar to like old school Boral. You would gain, I think, 3 mana every time you cast a spell card. So yeah, I think this is very breakable. Deal 2 damage to your opponent's Planeswalker. At the beginning of your turn, this card's level is 3 or less. This card's level becomes 1. Otherwise, exile this card and create a Great Work token. So we'll have to see what that is. But definitely seems abusable, especially with Raw. There's no limit to the casting spell cards and gaining mana, so I love that. Okay, yeah, this is a pretty awesome card. I think I missed the gain 4 mana before when I looked at this card, but yeah, really cool. Vorinclex. 6/8 with Trample and Reach for 15, which is pretty decent already. When this creature enters the battlefield, fetch the first 2 land cards from your library. Those cards gain 5 mana, so that's good. Very good synergy with a few different Planeswalkers, but especially Ren and 7. At the beginning of your turn, if you have 25 or more mana in your hand, you may drain 25 mana from your hand. If you do, exile this card and create a Grand Evolution token. Alright, well, that Grand Evolution token better be really good, because draining 25 mana from your hand is a lot. So, we'll have to see what that does. Zimone and Dina, Human Dryad, 8 mana, 3/4, tricolor. When you draw your second card in a turn, gain 4 life and your opponent loses 4 life. Okay. When a creature you control dies or loses a reinforcement, draw 2 cards. The first land support card in your hand gains full mana. That's pretty good. If it can't, convert 3 gems to your Planeswalker's colors, and this effect can trigger up to 3 times per turn. Okay, that's not bad. Activate 4, you may have target creature you control gain imminent death. Okay, so pairing this with any sort of token generator seems like the move to go with. First land support in your hand gains full mana. I like that as well. You could pair this with like Darksteel Citadel or some other really expensive land. Yeah, this is a great way. Like one of the things about PMA lands that is a bit of a drawback sometimes, it's that they're kind of expensive. They're like 15 mana for a card that doesn't start doing things for you until the next turn. So getting them out in an easy way is a great way to get utility from those cards faster. So I really like this card. I think it's a pretty good, just a way to establish your board state probably early in the game if you're able to get it out. So yeah, I think this is a card I'll use. And I love the full art for this card as well. That's really cool. That's one of my favorite pieces of art in the set. Zurgo and Ojutai. When this creature enters the battlefield, it gains hexproof until end of turn. When this creature deals combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, pick one of the first 4 cards from your library, fetch that card, it gains 8 mana. I like that. You can grab a Cut Your Losses or something, for example, and just pretty much be ready to cast the next turn with another gem swap. At the end of your turn, if you have 5 or less cards in your hand, return this creature to its owner's hand, and it gains 10 mana. Okay, so there is a little bit of a drawback to using this card for that reason, but it has some pretty solid abilities there. It's a 4/4 with haste and flying as well, which is not amazing, but not the worst. But yeah, pretty cool, and it gains hexproof also. I like this card. It's also tricolor, so you can grab it with Meeting of the Five. So we're getting some pretty good cards that have 3 colors in them. So Meeting of the Five will continue to be relevant with these new sets, which is always great. And I think it's still one of my top rated cards in this standard block right now. So yeah, I think that Meeting of the Five just overall is just one of the best cards in the game, I think, at this point. I use it in a lot of legacy decks, but yeah, I'm getting off track here. So let's move on. So we got our masterpieces now, and there are only 6 masterpieces that I found in this set. So I'm wondering what they're planning on doing, if they're just going to give us more cards or a new set soon, because this is a relatively small set, especially in the higher rarities. So we got Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep, is 15 mana for a 4/5, but it's got Vigilance and Ward. The Ward is drain 7 mana from your hand. When you cast a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, Serpent, or Merfolk from your hand, fetch the first card with lesser mana value from your library, gains full mana. So I think this can be a really good card, but I have to see what we have to pair with this. Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, Serpent, or Merfolk. So that's a lot to look through. And if I do get this card, I will run a search to find what I can pair this with, because that seems like a really good card. Nahiri, Forge and Fury. Oops. Creature Core Artificer. It's a 5/4 for 18 mana. At the beginning of your turn, if this card is in your hand, reduce its cost by X. until end of turn. Okay, so they at least built in a way to reduce the cost, because otherwise that's pretty expensive. When your first creature attacks, move the first equipment card from your library to play under your control. When this creature attacks, it gets +X/+X until end of turn. X is equal to 2 times the total shield of equipment supports you control. Okay. Yeah, this seems like a good pairing for Blade of Shared Souls, especially with Danitha. You're just gonna, I mean, they really gotta do something about that loop. I mean, there's so many ways to break it. I mean, it's already a broken loop just on its own, but there's so many ways to make it just impossibly OP. This might be another way of doing that. So, Octagon, you gotta listen to us when we tell you you gotta nerf that combo. It's just too easily abusable. Omnixilus, Captive Kingpin, 10 mana, 4/3 with trample and flying. When your opponent loses life, if they lost 3 or less life, this creature gets +2/+2. Draw a card. If that card is a spell card, it gains full mana and gains Outcast. Okay, so yeah, this is an interesting card. I definitely can think of ways to maybe abuse this card. So a spell deck with maybe Shieldred or this little guy Queza. Queza makes you lose life, and it makes you lose, I think, 2 life every time you draw a card. So you draw a card, and if the card is a spell card, it gains full mana and Outcast. So I think this could be, with Queza, a potential loop engine. So definitely one to pay attention to. Interesting card. I like it. Sarkhan, Soul of Flame, Human Shaman, Leader Dragon, 3/4 for 11 mana. It's got Leader Dragon, which is interesting. I have to see what dragon tokens are around in Standard right now. We got the Kami War token. We got Manaform Hellkite. We got a couple other. Rith, the Awakener, creates dragons, I want to say. Whichever one creates dragons, I forget. But at the beginning of your turn, reduce the cost of each dragon card in your hand by 3 until end of turn. Okay, that's fine, I guess. When a dragon creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have this creature gain can't attack and can't block until the beginning of your next turn. If you do reinforce that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. I don't know. I don't know if I like this card yet. I have to see it in play. I'm not seeing anything that makes me feel like it's a great card. It seems like it's a better card to pair with the Dungeons and Dragons. And yeah, I don't know. If you guys see something about this card that makes you more interested in it, let me know, but I don't really see it. Tyvar the Bellicose. Creature, elf warrior. When an elf creature you control attacks, gains death touch until end of turn, and convert 2 gems to your planeswalker's colors. Okay, that's alright. I like the death touch, and I like converting gems, so not bad. When you convert gems, target creature you control gets +1/+1. This effect can trigger up to 3 times per turn. So it's an interesting way of buffing your creatures. It helps to trigger proliferate and all that. You can continuously buff up your creatures. So I think that's a decent pairing there. So not an amazing card, but it definitely has some utility. I might use it. Well, all right. Those are all the cards. Give you all my thoughts. Thank you for watching. If you went through all of my videos here, can't thank you enough for that. I'm glad I was able to keep your attention for that long. This was a pretty long series to both go through and create the videos for. So yeah, thanks again, and let's look forward to the set when it drops and we can actually try out all these cards and see how they work in practice.